Good morning. Well, in the programme this week, the Climate Change Committee says substantial action is still needed to meet emissions targets in agriculture.
Generally speaking, there's been no real progress in either direction for agriculture and land use over the last year.
A group of farmers aims to take the government to court over its inheritance tax reform.
They say that the government has failed to consult properly.
And imported beef on supermarket shelves.
We're starting to see an increase in imports from Australia, New Zealand, and even places like Uruguay as well.
But let's start today with the next generation of agricultural talent, whether it be farmers, foresters, land managers or agronomists. Thousands of young people will graduate from agricultural courses across the UK this summer. And all week on our sister programme, Farming Today, we've been finding out what they hope to achieve and what jobs they're looking forward to. Our reporter Howard Shannon has been to Malton College in Northamptonshire to meet 4 of its students who've all just completed their agricultural studies.
So my name is Bilal Hamilton Gould. Farming came to me through my grandfather. Just helped my grandfather, farming sheep, making hay.
My name's Lizzie. I grew up on a small farm in Leicestershire. Both my parents are farmers, with a herd of about 40 cattle and 6 of my own belted Galloways.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm not from a farming background. I'm one of the first farmers in the family.
And we're also joined by Elliot.
I've started farming about 2.5 years ago. So it's level 3 extended diploma in agriculture. So it's been for the past 2 years. So we have a theory side and a practical side. So it's from everything from livestock management to business management and everything to do with farming. And on the practical side, we have 1 day a week where we go out doing lots of different things, from shearing sheep to going out drilling in the fields with the tractors.
Before college, all my experience was in sheep, but I've learned how to drive a tractor, I've learned how to handle cattle. It's been really rewarding. It's given me a lot more experience in agriculture as a whole.
I think currently as it stands, it's imperative that young people continue fostering a very close approach to agriculture, because without them, there is no agriculture. There is no one to take up the mantle of what their forefathers have done. You have to keep on bolstering that fundamental idea of I must contribute something to the agricultural sector.
Ag students Bill, Elliot, Katie and Lizzie there. The latest report from the Climate Change Committee, which advises the government, says little progress has been made on emissions from the agriculture and land use sectors in recent years, and substantial action is needed. The report released this week shows that agriculture produced 46.6 million tonnes of CO2 in 2023-24. That's more than aviation at 38 million tonnes, but about half that of road transport at 100 million tonnes. Tom Lancaster, head of Land, Food and Farming at the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, told Anna Hill that despite showing some gains in areas like woodland creation and peatland restoration, overall the report shows that more progress is needed.
There's been an improvement in rates of peatland restoration, I think particularly in England and Scotland. And similarly, with regard to woodland creation, I think there's been a significant increase in woodland creation, again in Scotland primarily, but also in England. And that's been enough to bring overall woodland creation rates for the UK to, I think, a 20-year high. But it's also not enough in the context of where the Climate Change Committee have said we need to be, not just sort of in a decade's time, but just in 3 or 4 years' time toward the end of this decade and this Parliament.
Now, one other area was cutting meat consumption, which is mentioned in the report as beneficial to cutting carbon emissions. Has that happened?
According to the Climate Change Committee, again, that is on trend, if you like. And I think that reflects the fact that people are just choosing to eat slightly differently now. We eat food from lots of different cultures, many of which have a much bigger focus and culture of eating vegetarian foods.
Connected to that is the fall in the number of livestock in the country, sheep as well as cattle, which we have mentioned in previous programmes. Is that making a significant difference?
It will make a difference in terms of emissions over time, because cattle and sheep are ruminant livestock, so they emit significant amounts of methane. So agriculture accounts for over half of the UK's methane emissions, which is a really powerful greenhouse gas. But it will also make a difference in terms of the land available for the woodland and other habitats that we need to create in order to get to net zero. And this isn't necessarily a sort of bad news story for farming. I think this can be a really good news story for farming if the sector across the 4 countries of the UK is supported in the right way through new land management schemes, but also through the markets that all farmers have to engage with and the buyers and supermarkets that farmers have to sell their produce to.
Well, in fact, the report does say nearly in every paragraph, this means the government must take action in one way or another. Will this report make a difference to government policy?
I think it should do. The Climate Change Committee are a really well-respected body, particularly by this government. I think there's a dawning realisation really amongst ministers and officials that climate change itself is a huge threat to food security and to food production in the UK. And when you put that together with the fact that I think ministers are convinced that investing in the net zero transition, and not just for farming but for other sectors, the sort of opportunities that these new green technologies provide for economic growth, the Climate Change Committee's advice will be listened to in the corridors of power.
Tom Lancaster from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. Well, uncertainty around environmental payment schemes for farmers in England has been causing concern, as we've been reporting over the past few months. Lilliput Farm near Bath in Somerset has made plans to weather it all by opening their own farm restaurant, through which they sell their organic pasture-fed beef. The site of the Battle of Lansdowne in 1643, and with links to Jonathan Swift, Lilliput Farm has been run by Oliver Stanley for the past 26 years. For our sister programme, Radio 4's On Your Farm, I went to visit his traditional Hereford cattle.
They're very relaxed as we stand and stare, aren't they? So they're not small animals by any stretch. They're quite chunky beef animals. Big white faces, little horns, and then this beautiful rusty colour coat with the white running underneath on their legs and tummies. So Oliver, how does it differ? If you're doing organic, outside, only pasture fed, how would that differ from the average beef animal in terms of timing?
They take longer to grow, so we don't slaughter until they're 3.
And it can be as little as 15 months, can't it, in a more commercial beef setup?
So, yes. But you do need the grain and the soya in order to reach that weight. You don't have much margin for error, so it's a very low input system, but organic hay is not easy to find in an emergency, so you really have to calibrate your livestock numbers with the amount of grazing and conserved forage you've got.
So when you very first got this farm, when you were still working as a doctor at the same time, what did you do?
We put it into a countryside stewardship in 96, it would have been.
So just to explain, countryside stewardship is one of the schemes that the governments have run over the years, which pays farmers to farm in a more environmentally friendly way. And it's sort of income foregone. So instead of having a load of, in this case, cattle, you can have fewer because the government is giving you some money towards that. To simplify it radically.
Yes. You have to treat your grassland as an important asset in its own right and try to maintain its diversity and species as much as possible.
So at that point, when you were still working also farming, was the farm breaking even?
That's really been very difficult because we were building up our herds slowly from 2007, and then more recently we've actually been building up the livestock in order to provide food for the restaurant. But it would be completely impossible without the countryside stewardship grants, and of course there were the farm basic payments as well originally, which have now largely gone.
Because at the moment there is quite a lot of discussion about what will happen in the future to these schemes. Does that make you a little bit worried?
Yes. All sorts of unpleasant obstacles appear to be looming up through the fog.
There is a consultation at the moment that the government's running, looking at getting private money into the system. I mean, should this just be down to taxpayers to underwrite it all?
I think that there is a large element of public goods in what we're providing here. We're on the Cotswold National Trail. People like walking through the countryside. They like seeing it managed in what they consider to be a traditional way. Livestock are a critical part of maintaining any pastoral system. It's not unreasonable to expect a degree of public support for public goods. And the other thing we have to try to do is to show that the beef that's being produced in the system is of that much higher quality, so people are prepared to support it privately. And that's what we have been finding at the restaurant.
Oliver Stanley. You can hear more tomorrow morning at 6:30 or anytime on BBC Sounds. Just search for On Your Farm. Many UK supermarkets have, with great fanfares, made public commitments to sourcing 100% of their beef from the UK. But in recent months, some seem to be moving away from these pledges. Last month, Asda was selling Uruguayan beef for a limited period. 2 weeks ago, Morrison's ran a trial selling Australian beef. Sainsbury's has had Wagyu beef from New Zealand on its shelves. Well, the National Farmers Union says reneging on sourcing commitments erodes trust and damages farmer confidence, though some other supermarkets have reiterated their commitment to stocking only 100% UK beef. How much beef then is being imported, from where and why? Anna spoke to Kevin White from The Grocer, who's been following this.
I think we're starting to see evidence of slight tweaks to often long-standing cast iron sourcing commitments when it comes to beef in particular, really. What was once a widespread commitment for British and Irish is now starting to fray, really, and we're starting to see an increase in imports from places such as Australia and New Zealand, and even places like Uruguay as well.
Why is imported beef appearing on our shelves then?
Well, I think it's a combination of issues, really. First of all, you've got tight supply of the UK herd. AHDB suggests that supply could be down by about 4% this year. You've also got soaring farm gate prices, which makes the product more expensive as well. And in the wake of trade deals with Australia and New Zealand in 2022, we're now starting to see an increase in imports. Initially, they were targeted at the food service sector, but we're now seeing a lot more apparent interest from the retailers in sourcing from these countries as well.
Is it produced at different standards? Does that make it cheaper? That's the fear from UK farmers, isn't it?
It varies, really. It varies. So, for example, Asda started selling Uruguayan beef in May, but that was from a free-range herd, so not your typical South American feedlot system. Sainsbury's is selling New Zealand beef burgers and kebabs as well under their Taste the Difference label, which is obviously a premium label. And Morrison's has recently unveiled a range of Australian beefsteaks as well. This is not just lowest common denominator bargain basement meat. Some of it is apparently of a high quality. When I spoke to Asda about them selling Uruguayan beef, they said it didn't break their 100% British and Irish sourcing commitment, which is just for own label, and this was a brand that they were selling, so they kind of got out of it that way. In terms of New Zealand beef burgers and kebabs in Sainsbury's said that represents just 0.1% of their entire beef offering. And Morrison's, well, they conceded that them launching Australian beefsteaks did constitute them breaking their 100% British sourcing commitment, and they stressed that they still sell 100% British on their meat counters, but obviously they're closing a lot of their meat counters as well. So, that's what I mean by the fraying of these once cast iron commitments.
We aren't self-sufficient, though, in beef, are we? So do we need to support some beef from other countries?
100%, and we do, and we obviously, we backfill most of that supply with Irish beef as well. So it's interesting to see that they're casting the net wider now, which is totally fine, isn't it? It's the only issue that certainly the farming sector have is the fact that they've made these commitments. They've said we're only going to sell British beef or British and Irish beef, and now they're changing position. And what we're seeing now is a real kind of divergence in the retailers that still do that and the ones that are now kind of looking elsewhere for their supply. So the likes of Aldi, Lidl, Co-op and Waitrose have all come out to reaffirm their 100% British sourcing commitments in the past few weeks, and taken a little bit of a dig at their rivals for not doing the same, really. What's interesting about beef in particular is that they had a really good year last year. Sales were up almost £200 million year on year as consumers came back into the category for, following inflation and COVID and everything. And obviously, as the price continues to rise, that could have challenges on demand. So, are they doing this so that they can keep their prices down and maintain that demand? But clearly, it's a difficult market for them at the moment. And, they're having to deal with quite a challenged sector at the moment as well.
Kevin White from The Grocer. Well, on hearing that, the Farming Today inbox began to fill. Roger Burton emailed to say, how does the cost of transport from the other side of the world affect the beef prices? And maybe more importantly, the environmental cost in emissions. Barbara Morgan added, that doesn't make sense. Cut meat consumption, but then meat coming from abroad will come with a carbon footprint. And Gordon Rennie added, do those farmers who complain about imported meat also buy imported farm machinery? Do they drive imported cars? If so, he says, please ask them why they don't buy British. Do send us your thoughts on email. We are farming.today@bbc.co.uk, or you could tweet us on X. We are at BBC Farming Today. Now, a group of farmers is seeking a judicial review over the decision to reimpose inheritance tax on some farm businesses. The as yet unnamed farmers are challenging what they say is a lack of government consultation on the changes. As we've reported, farmers around the country have held protests over the government's decision to introduce new rules on agricultural and business property relief from next April. They say making farms liable to 20% tax over assets of £1 million when they pass from one generation to the next will put some out of business. Ministers say the tax is fair and that farmers can spread the payments over 10 years. James Austin is a partner at the law firm Collier Bristow, which is representing the farmer group. I asked him why they want a judicial review.
They don't want one. They feel they've been forced into asking for one because they say that the government has failed to consult properly on its proposed changes to agricultural property relief and business property relief. And they would like the government to have that consultation now.
So they're not directly challenging the decision itself, they're challenging the lack of consultation before it was made.
Precisely. I mean, it's a fundamental constitutional principle that every government has the right to make whatever policy changes and legislate accordingly that they want. The issue here isn't about the substantive tax changes. It's about the process by which that should happen. And the right process is for the government to consult properly first, to consider the consultation responses, and then to legislate accordingly, taking into account the evidence that they've received.
So if these farmers are successful, what would that mean?
Well, we don't know. There are several possibilities. One is that the court could order the government to hold a new consultation exercise. The court might instead just make a declaration to say that the failure to consult was unlawful, but without actually requiring any positive action by the government. There are a number of possible outcomes if the claim is successful.
These farmers haven't yet been named. Are they people who are directly affected?
They are, yes. So there are 3 claimants. 2 of them are farmers. They're father and son whose family have been farming the same land in Cambridgeshire for over 100 years. And the third is a group that was set up very recently called Farmers and Businesses for Fair Tax Relief. And they're supported by one of their members in the claim. And their details will become publicly known shortly.
James Austin, a Treasury spokesperson, told us they don't comment on potential litigation matters. Work has begun this week to clear up more than 30,000 tonnes of illegally dumped waste from a Kent woodland in an operation led by the Environment Agency. We've been following the saga of this waste dumped on the protected site for some time now. It's estimated that the clean-up of Hodes Wood near Ashford will take more than a year and cost around £15 million. The Environment Agency says the wood was used by criminal gangs to dump household and construction waste over a 6-month period in 2023. Investigations are ongoing into who's responsible. BBC South's environment correspondent Yvette Austin reports.
I'm being driven by the Environment Agency into the heart of Hodes Wood in a buggy. It all looks very different to 18 months ago. Weeds now cover the waste, which is piled 4 metres high in places. And it's turned into a tightly regulated site, with health and safety at the forefront. Back when the waste was dumped, it was the opposite. Criminal gangs for 6 months randomly tipping their lorry loads in a site of special scientific interest. Emma Viner is Enforcement and Investigations Manager at the Environment Agency.
There's been months of preparation work going in to construct roadways, to construct areas that are safe for workers, to make sure that the ecology is protected. So it's been a really extensive process to get to today.
The first of around 2,000 lorry loads have begun leaving the site. There'll be 10 a day, destined for an approved landfill site in Essex. The cost of the operation has risen from an estimated £10 million to up to 15. The Environment Agency now knows a lot more about this waste after the months of preparation for today. It was treated, it was processed, anything of value had been taken out, and what's left is plastic, glass, construction waste, oils, low-level hazardous waste. It should have gone to landfill, and that's now finally where it's going now. The rogue operators would have saved paying around £4 million in landfill tax by dumping the waste here rather than taking it to an approved facility. The authorities say it's organised crime. Matthew Scott is Kent's Police and Crime Commissioner. The Environment Agency has described waste crime as the new narcotics. Is that a case?
I agree, and it's an area where we're seeing more people starting to become involved and doing it in different ways. Hodeswood is just one example of where we're seeing this crime taking place. In other places, they're buying up their own land and tipping it on their own land, and they're trying to legitimise themselves by buying other waste companies in order to try and show that they are trying to do the right thing, when we know they're trying to avoid tax, they're trying to avoid doing the right thing and trying to avoid recycling, to the blight of everybody else. That's why policing, the Environment Agency and the councils have to work together to solve this problem.
Meanwhile, there is still anger among conservationists and the local community. So much waste was allowed to be tipped for so long. But relief, it is now being moved. Ian Rickards is from Kent Wildlife Trust.
Woodland is such a rare habitat anyway, but losing that amount for no real reason it's heartbreaking, really, isn't it? It's just made such a big difference to... You wouldn't see it driving past, you think, oh, nothing's happened, and then you just disappear into the woodlands and you see this massive hole that's been made. And that's never going to be recovered.
So what now for the wood? It'll take at least until next summer to remove all the waste in as clean and efficient way as possible. Drainage ditches and soils below are contaminated, so digging down will be necessary. It will all leave a nasty scar on the woodland and those responsible for protecting it.
Yvette Austin reporting there. A quick plug before I go. On tomorrow evening's Country File on BBC One, I'm looking into wildfires. This year has sadly been a record-breaking one for wildfires in the UK, and with a heatwave on the way, it's likely there will be more. We look at how we can tackle them and how we can avoid them, and hear from wildfire expert Professor Tom Smith from the London School of Economics, who's working on the UK's new fire danger rating system, designed to predict where wildfires might break out.
So other countries like Australia, the US, Canada have these fire danger rating systems. And what they do is take the weather, for example, so how windy it is, how dry it has been, what's the temperature today, what's the relative humidity. But importantly, they look at what the fuel is on the ground. So our project is about mapping the different vegetation in the UK. So is it shrubland, is it grasses, is it forest? Is it dormant? Is it dry? And once you combine that weather component with the condition of the fuel on the ground, we can begin to predict what the danger of a wildfire might be.
And the way we manage land is changing, isn't it? We've got more wild areas, we've got more areas where we don't graze them, we've got more areas where we do leave dead wood on the forest floor for the bugs.
Yes.
Are we creating problems for ourselves?
Yes. With more vegetation, that is fire risk. It's short to medium term because once that vegetation matures, it actually becomes fire resilient. So you've just got this window of time, which may be 10, 15, 20 years in some places, when the fire risk is going to be elevated.
Professor Tom Smith. More on all that on tomorrow's Country File. That's at 5:25 on BBC One. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton. And Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.